Welcome back to another episode of the X podcast. Today, I am joined by Carlos, the new CEO of MeWe. I'll be your host for today, Cesar Martinez, and we have a lot of juicy stuff to talk about. I think SocialFi has been a really hot narrative in crypto for the last maybe 2 years, and we've seen a lot of SocialFi apps come and go. Some bring in something new to the table. A lot of stuff trying to ride the wave. But when we talked to Lisa and the team over at MeWe, we saw that hey, what they're building over here on Avalanche could be something really interesting and bringing a new take to the SocialFi meta and the narrative that's happening in crypto right now. Carlos, welcome in. You want to tell us a little bit about who you are? I know you're a brand new person to the team. What brought you over to MeWe?
Awesome. Nice being with you, Cesar. I appreciate the time. Look, I just started as CEO about a month ago. Super excited to be with MeWe and to be building our own L1 on Avalanche. It's been an interesting journey. A little bit more about my background. I've been in the crypto space since 2016, mostly on the institutional side of crypto, running hedge funds and market making desks. And maybe about 2 years ago, I was approached by the MeWe executive team to come join as an advisor in this, path of getting them to Web3. And most recently, the board approached me to see if I would be willing to step in as CEO and really get MeWe to the next level. And so I'm super excited about the opportunity and looking forward to our conversation today.
That's awesome. That's really good to know because this episode is not only going to be an introduction for our entire 100x community, but also hopefully bring in more clarity and more answers to the people who are MeWe's community and want to learn more about, hey, they want to get to know the CEO a little bit more, see and understand how this helps the direction and the vision of MeWe and Soshi moving forward. I think knowing that you've been in the team or you've been around MeWe for more than a month is really good. Being on the advisor for 2 years really shows that, hey, you know the product, you know what they're going, and you've advised them in the past. But I think one of the things that I was talking to Lisa about is the idea of having a CEO or someone at the leadership position that comes from Web3 and understands crypto a little bit better, or than just someone maybe who's had Web2 experience their whole life, does bring something new to the table. Do you think that that's maybe one of the reasons why the board looked to you as a possible option to go ahead and take that spot?
Look, I think so. I think MeWe's done some incredible things, and I'd like to maybe step back a little bit and give all our listeners some background on MeWe, right? MeWe's been around actually since 2012. Uh, and the premise of MeWe was to create a privacy social media platform that really empowered users and protected users' data. And to me, that was a very fascinating opportunity when I was, you know, figuring out if this was a real good role for me, right? I've been mostly on the institutional side of crypto for a long time, and this was a little bit outside the box. But to me, it's fascinating because of where we're seeing the ecosystem go. And we're starting to see, the birth of these super apps, right? Where a lot of things are at your fingertips right then and there. And having such a vibrant community, a lot of people don't realize how big MeWe is and how many users we have. But to give you guys a flavor, MeWe has over 20 million users across 200 countries and territories. We offer our app in 20 different languages. And on any given month, we'll have anywhere between 1 to 1.5 million active users. And so to us, allowing for MeWe users to be able to really not only have control of their personal data and privacy, but also bring them into Web3 and have the right tools to become financially independent in the future is something that's fascinating. And that was really, for me, one of the things that sold me on the opportunity. Of course, knowing the team, you've mentioned Lisa a couple of times. Lisa's our head of marketing. Having discussions with her, having discussions with some of the other team members, and where we could take MeWe to, it's the best, right? It's always a continuous creative atmosphere, and I'm very much looking forward to bringing in as many products, Web3 products, native Web3 products to our communities and to any new users that come on to MeWe.
I mean, you hit a lot of really interesting points that I want to ask a little bit more about. I think when we think about SocialFi and one of the things that we mentioned already, a lot of people think SocialFi is something that's been around for just a little bit. I think there's some good examples of apps that are born out of Web3 that came into that SocialFi aspect and that niche. But when you talk about MeWe, correct me if I'm wrong, you said it's been around since 2012. So you guys aren't new to this. This is a new product that just came out recently that's going to try to test the waters in Web3. This is a product that's been around for longer than a decade. And the fact that you guys are still successful, being a social app just in regular out there is hard enough. We've seen a lot of them close over the last couple of years. So the fact that you guys have been around since 2012 and are still thriving in 2025, that's really an interesting aspect of MeWe. For someone, because I'm also myself, I'm not too familiar with MeWe, but for someone who also maybe a listener isn't familiar with MeWe, what is the MeWe app? What are people able to do in it? Why do you guys have such a vibrant community?
Sure. Look, I think I get this question all the time. What is MeWe? A lot of people don't know about MeWe. Part of the reason why they don't know about MeWe is because our focus has always been on privacy. And so we've never had any external at-large marketing campaigns. All of our growth has been natural growth over the years. And what is even more important about MeWe, think about MeWe as any other social media app, even compare us to somebody like Meta, Instagram, TikTok. We have a lot of communities. Our biggest differentiator is that we don't have any bots that target you, and we do not sell your information or your personal data. And that is something that I think a lot of people recognize, and we're making a really big effort to keep it that way. And so what ends up happening inside of MeWe and why we have such a vibrant community is because people have left other social media apps because they felt like it was a predatory engagement. Whereas at MeWe, they can be who they want to be. They can share as much as they want to share, but always knowing that their data isn't going to be sold to somebody else. And I'll just step right into it. We have sometimes a little bit of a hard time competing with some of the larger social media apps. And part of the reason why we have a hard time is because we're not monetizing user data. In fact, every single post, every single picture or video you share within the MeWe community never goes anywhere. You know, we are footing the bill for you guys to have an environment where you can make friends and feel as part of a real community. And we assure you that your data will always be secure. And then shortly after I say this, people ask me, so how do you guys make revenue? Very simple. We make revenue by donations from our community and our user base, and we make revenue by having premium subscriptions that grant you access to additional features. But where we're going, which is the fascinating stuff, is all the products that you guys have been accustomed to seeing in Web3. A fully functional working wallet, NFTs, the ability to stake, the ability to be interoperable. And part of the reason why we partnered with Avalanche is exactly because Avalanche is built for scale. It has the speed, it has a great user experience, and that's exactly what a global social platform needs. So they meet every criteria that we have for our users in our community. And I mean, I can go on and on for probably hours talking about some of the wonderful things that Avalanche has done, not just from, you know, the help that they provide to all of their partners, but the thriving ecosystem, right? We're talking about sub-second finality, low fees, flexible architecture. They have everything. And it's a beautiful thing to see to grow. And it's also great for us to introduce Soshi.network, which is going to be our L1. And we're very excited about that and excited for our users to be able to have all the tools at their disposal and not necessarily need to leave our app to be able to get access to, you know, an annual percentage yield, for example, or get access to conversions and tapping into the greater ecosystem that we have to offer to them, right? All the staking mechanisms will be ready soon. All of the reward systems will be ready soon. And what we've been building for the last year or so is something incredible that's not out there. We've already built a reputation system for every single one of our users. So if you're a MeWe user on a daily basis, you have a reputation score. And what's fascinating about that is we want to expand that to Soshi Network, right? To our L1, where we have every community inside MeWe. We have over 600,000 groups. All of them will have a reputation score. And anybody building on an open API L1 can tap into those users. And so we are envisioning a future that is very different than what we have today, where, for example, we could have a D app on our L1 and we can match, let's say it's a gaming D app, we can match all of our gaming groups to that D app on Soshi, and we can make sure that they have our best reputation users using their game. It's something that hasn't been done before, and we're really kind of pushing the boundaries of what we want to do, and that's what's exciting about MeWe and exciting about Soshi.
You just went through a lot of really awesome stuff, and I think being able to be, as a listener, just hearing everything you're saying, it all makes sense. But let's break it down a little bit, because I think one of the big questions that I have, and I always have for products and projects that come on the show that come from Web 2 and are entering Web 3, I think a lot of the Web 3 people who are native and who have been here and who believe in the vision have been burned a lot by people who are coming from Web 2 or just looking to find some liquidity and take some extract some value out of the space and then move on, right? But when you're talking about MeWe and Soshi and why you guys are deciding to move to Web 3, that's always one of my big questions. And you mentioned it. Like, I think when you look at how social media apps currently work, and I've grown to be tired of this as well. I think anytime I look up something on one app, all of a sudden every other app that I have somehow knows that I searched up this one thing on Google or searched up this one thing on Facebook, and all of a sudden I'm seeing ads everywhere. No matter how hard I try to get rid of all these cookies everywhere, it somehow follows me. Sometimes I don't even type it. I feel like they hear my conversations that I'm having in real life, and then all of a sudden I'm seeing ads for something that I talked about with one of my friends or with my wife. And it's getting scarier and scarier, because no matter how much you think you have your privacy, you have your password set properly, like someone always knows what you're doing out there in the internet. And then when you talk about like, well, MeWe takes all that away. You know, you don't have to worry about that because we're not monetizing people's data. That is very, very important. And I can understand why there's so many people who love MeWe, because that's something that we used to take for granted. And now it's like really hard to find a place where your data is not being sold. And then you answer the other question. Okay, well, what about monetization? If you guys aren't monetizing people's data, how are you guys keeping the lights on, or have been keeping the lights on for 13 years? Where you talk about like, hey, premium subscription models. I want to say this. I have an X premium account and my data is still being sold. So not even paying like a premium account on these other apps sometimes takes that away. So the fact that you guys are able to still do that while having these other abilities is really awesome, you know? And then the other question I was going to ask that you started to get into is like, okay, what led MeWe and Soshi to come to Web 3? I think, and you started talking a little bit about it, but I want to hear more of the vision. You talk about an interconnected ecosystem, you know, a place where someone can go into and never have to leave the app or the ecosystem. Why do you feel like Web 3 can enable this, and why is this so much harder? Why are you guys building this in Web 3 and not just in Web 2? Is my
No,
question.
that it look, Web3 has a lot of the things that fit what MeWe is all about, right? Web3 protects your privacy, right? Web3 really allows for transactions to be a lot faster, and it's only going to continue to get better. But why this notion that you can be in a single app and do a lot of things, right? You know, maybe for some listeners in some parts of the world, this is something that they've already been using, right? I mean, as it pertains to the greater crypto community, we get to fly around to some really cool cities and go to some really cool conferences. And, you know, I could use the example of Singapore, right? You go to Singapore, you download an app, you can get rideshare, you can order food, you can do everything you need to do in a single app, right? And so, but when you come to maybe the States, right, it's a lot different, right? And so we're trying to start bridging the gap between what some super apps are doing already and what, let's call them standalone apps are doing in the US. A great example also is in Latin America. you are starting to see a lot of apps that started, let's say, as a simple retail conversion platform become exchanges, also become lending houses, and also go into predictive markets, right? And so with MeWe, what's fascinating is the community is already there. The community does care a lot about the connections that you're making, and the connections are true to the real ethos of social media, right? The real ethos of social media was for you to have a place, a safe place on the internet to connect with your friends. But it moved so far away from that when they started monetizing user data. And then even more now with the rise of the bots, that is sometimes very difficult for people to wrap their mind around, that all of their data and information in any given website doesn't belong to them anymore. And so we are the opposite of that. We want you to own your own data. And we are getting very creative how we can potentially come up with new revenue streams. And that's part of something that I've been kind of spearheading. I'll give you some flavor to that where we could use the blockchain for some of this stuff is tipping mechanisms, right? I think I always talk about how amazing the crypto space has been for artists. And we saw, maybe 6 years ago, the start of all these NFT marketplaces and all these digital creators post their art on these marketplaces. And the premise of them having the ability to have a royalty in perpetuity anytime that their art gets sold, to me was something that was super fascinating. And what I want to do is I want to encourage creators to come onto MeWe, and we're going to roll out tools like tipping mechanisms. So if somebody's a content creator and they want to share a video, a picture, some digital artwork, that other members of the greater MeWe community can tip them right then and there. And so this will also allow us to be able to monetize a little bit, but without having to risk having somebody's personal information be out there, right? Or your data just completely be out in the open public. So I think we look at it in a very different fashion than a lot of the other social media companies, and that's what makes us special.
I think you're touching on a subject that I found really interesting because I've also wondered this myself. I think you mentioned, in Asia, there's apps that are already super apps. I think, you can think of a couple examples over there. South America also, with some super apps that people use on a daily basis. But when you talk about super apps, it's hard to come up with a really good example here in the States or here in North America because you can think of Meta and Facebook, with Facebook owning Instagram and then Threads and then them trying to connect them all. But in reality, all we have is really standalone apps. When I think about, and I've come to, and I'm sure a lot of people are this way too, but all my apps have specific functions. If I want a specific type of meme or like specific type of content, I'll go to TikTok. If I want a different kind of comedy or different kind of content, I'll go to Instagram Reels. If I want something completely different, I'll go to YouTube Shorts. And it's like because they're all siloed and everything. And I feel like I've come to this point where like the way that I use my apps, it all really depends, but nothing is ever coherent unless, they're starting to sell my data, and that's when I start seeing the bleed through between the apps. But this idea of what, and my question comes down to this, like, why do you think the US or North America has been lagging behind when where super apps have shown to be successful in other places around the world? Why haven't we seen one really take hold here in the States?
That's an interesting question. I've thought a lot about why in some cases we're far behind, right? And I think it's a combination of different things. We have very strong investor protection rules and regulations in the US. And so when we start thinking about financial applications, that's always at top of mind for the regulators. And I think that's a big reason why we haven't seen a defined book of laws and regulations around Web3 and crypto. And I think that this administration certainly trying to fix that. And conversely, look at, for example, exchanges, right? For the last decade or so, the bulk of users and transactions and volumes being traded across the crypto ecosystem has come from Asian exchanges. Part was because they had an upper hand. They could offer perpetual swaps, right? They could offer options products. Whereas exchanges here in the US could only offer spot. And so I think as the country evolves and as the new administration is implementing new rules, this will get a little bit better over time. But also, it's also a very tall order for any single standalone app to start rolling out products and features that could eventually make it into a super app. It's a tall order for us, right? We don't have the deep pockets that somebody like Meta has, for example, but we're doing the best with the tools that we have and the team that we have to start really thinking outside the box and being able to provide some products that are really going to shock the system. And so we're excited to be participating in that front. And look, I think over time things will get much better and you'll start seeing a lot more apps in the US offer more than one product.
So when we're talking about this as a listener, I'm trying to think of how to wrap my head around the value proposition of MeWe, Soshi, and what you guys are building. I think you guys are trying to fit a not so much a niche, but a need in the market over like, hey, you realize there's not a lot of super apps here in the States or in the West, and there's a need for that because I think there are people who would like to be able to do pretty much everything that they need to do on the internet in one place. I think the ease of use, the accessibility, all that makes sense. I think we've been trained to think that we just need a lot of apps. I mean, when you ask the regular person how many apps they have on their phone, it could be hundreds, and they all have specific use cases for this one random thing that they can't do anywhere else, but that's the only reason that they have an application. When you think about the idea of like, hey, what if we just break all that down and bring it all into one place? It does make sense. And then when you talk about the idea of like, hey, you can start doing that without having to worry about your privacy, and having a company like MeWe that has 13 years of privacy protection and not selling people's data to show for, I think it really comes to a good proposition of like, hey, maybe MeWe is the place and the people and the team to start leading or spearheading that direction, because they've shown that they are willing to do it the right way and not in a way where it's going to compromise people's data. So that makes me really interested. The other part, though, I think, and the part where I think most people, especially in the States and in the West, are going to have a little bit of an issue or like a little bit of hard time understanding is the need for like what it actually looks like on a day-to-day basis. I think other people around the world who live in South America, who live in South Asia, they can already understand the need for it and like why they want it. But for someone who maybe doesn't have that yet or hasn't experienced it, what do you see a day-to-day thing that MeWe, Soshi, and what you guys are building will one day hopefully look like and allow people to do?
Oh, for sure. This is exciting. By the way, I think one of the drawbacks of capitalism is having so many choices. I mean, you go to any grocery store and you see 100 brands of cereal, but your family only buys one or two every time, right? So this is kind of like in that same vein, right? But look, what I envision a future of what MeWe is going to look like and what we're building at Soshi is fascinating. I think of one of the tools that we have that we believe is something incredibly special, and I alluded to it earlier, is the number of groups and communities we have inside MeWe. But we go further than that. Inside MeWe, some of our groups are completely private, and you get to decide your settings. So nobody else can look at your group unless you've been invited or unless you apply and you get accepted, right? And so we're envisioning a place where some of the groups that are thriving, let's say you are the owner of that group and you decide, hey, I've had this group for 5 years. It's great. I've built a great community, but I'm tired. I need a break. What about if you own that group through an NFT, through a smart contract, and you could put up that group for sale and somebody else can make a bid on it and run your community now? How incredible is that? And how powerful is that? And so we envision a future where you're inside MeWe walls, we protect all your data, you can have your reputation score that is directly linked to how people interact with you inside that community. And if it's up to me, just because of my background, I want to see the ability inside MeWe walls to have some kind of gaming, some kind of gambling, some kind of predictive markets. And I won't go into details on all the things that we're cooking, but I'll give you a little bit of a flavor. And I think that we're going to become an app where almost every single Web3 user is going to want to come in and have at the bare minimum a profile so that they can see all the activity that's going on in there, but also maybe be able to participate in the onslaught of rewards that we're going to give our community. And as a teaser for L1, I'll put so much emphasis on rewarding our community that I think it's going to become so attractive that it's going to be very hard for anybody in crypto not to step foot within our walls. And that is part of what I'm pushing for and what I've directed my entire team to do, is to focus on giving back to our users.
And I will say that is something that Lisa really harped on when I had a call with her. I think the idea of not only being able to find a different ways to monetize MeWe and keep you guys' door open and continue to grow because you guys aren't selling people's data, but also the idea of like, okay, well, MeWe and any social media app doesn't work without the users, doesn't work without people actually creating content. And if you look at TikTok, you look at YouTube, you look at Instagram, you look at Facebook, the way that people are able to monetize their content has gotten really convoluted. It's not a very straightforward way. You have to meet certain requirements, and it's not like it's open for everyone. And I think that's one of the things that Web3 has a big fix for, being able to find a really easy way that everyone could sort of benefit from the content that they make, their contributions to something for the social media apps. And I think what you're able to do, and you have here with MeWe, is being able to empower that. Because when you talk about an all-in-one app, or a place for an ecosystem that people could do everything they can think of, a lot of people have tried to build that in Web3. There's applications, there's chains, but the thing is that those people are building a chain and then hoping they can find users for that chain. MeWe's doing it the other way around. They're like, hey, we have all these users, we already have an app, we have strong communities. Now what can we use Web3 for to build for them? So you guys aren't building something and then hoping people come. You guys already have the people there. Now let's build something cool for the
That's
people that
right.
are here.
And this might be a little bit more of a message to our existing MeWe community. You know, going into Web3 came with some resistance, right? People are used to what they have, right? And they enjoy what been able to provide to them, right, as a product. I think some of the initiatives that we're taking on right now is a full push to have a much more simplified UI UX. So the user experience, you guys will start noticing it within the next 2 to 3 months. We're going to have a completely redefined UI that is going to be a lot easier and more intuitive for the users, with a discovery tool where, look, we don't want to use any kind of bots, right? That is our goal. Like, we don't want to be targeting you guys with bots. Could we potentially use AI to help, with quality assurance or customer success? We might do that, right? But we're not going to be eavesdropping on Caesar's conversation about wanting to buy a car and then sending him targeted advertising, right? So what's special about that is, once we have this new UI and UX that's simplified, right? Part of it is really helping our existing Web2 community understand the benefits of Web3 and educating them. And so we've come up with a really unique gamified experience. And by participating on that gamified experience, not only will you learn about Web3 and how to use MeWe, but we're going to reward you for it. A little tidbit of some of the things that we're looking to do is, look, we understand that for some people, they don't care if their data's out there. We understand that. And so, look, we're not going to force you to sell your data, but if you don't mind that your data's out there, would be glad to have you opt in to ads, and we'll give you a cut of the revenue we generate from that using our token. So that is something that nobody wants to do. Or maybe they're just making too much money and they just want to keep it all for themselves. But for us, our users are ahead of all interests as it pertains to generating revenue off of people.
Yeah, I mean, up until now, other companies don't really have a reason to share it in their revenue. If people are willingly giving up their data, or maybe not willingly, but just unknowingly allowing these companies to sell their data and make money off of them, what incentive do they have to share some of that profit? But when you start from the ground up saying, hey, we protect and we respect people's privacy, but now if you're okay with us sharing it or selling it or using it to monetize, and we'll give you a cut out of it, I think that's a very different approach and a valid proposition for people to be like, hey, I'm already doing this with all these other apps. If I can do the same thing here and make something out of it, because that's really
And,
powerful.
and we don't want to just do it with data. We also want to do it with your attention, right? We feel that our users help us be what we are. And so, how about a future where if you're willing to watch an ad, we're not giving your data away, but if you want to watch an ad and you're willing to do that, how about we reward you for doing that?
Mm-hmm.
How cool is that? And almost feels like you're truly giving to the community versus just squeezing everything out of them.
Yeah. You mentioned the some of the pushback or questions that you got from your existing community, because I think that's the other big part of the puzzle. It's one thing for a Web2 company to say, hey, we're going to go over Web3, but to bring along a community along with them along the journey it's been a very hard thing because there's a lot of pushback, there's a lot of misconceptions, there's a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to Web3, crypto, NFTs. A lot of people think it's a scammy sector. How has the feedback been, and how have you guys been able to answer the questions and ease those concerns as you guys make this move from just a fully Web2 company to being on chain?
Yeah, no, this is a great question, right? I'm kind of one of those CEOs that I'm very open. So I actively use MeWe every day. I literally respond to people and I think that they're shocked when they get a message from me and they're like, "Oh, you're actually you?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm texting you." And we're just listening to everyone. We want to know what the pain points are. We want to see if possibly we can get them engaged in helping us. And I think one of the greatest things that we've done in the last few days is launch our ambassador program. And this is an initiative that's going to really help users start understanding the benefits of Web3 and having somebody that can walk them through it, right? And we're very much expecting a lot of our ambassadors to almost handhold some of the Web2 users and really start slowly with them. I don't think anybody, or we're expecting anybody to rush to know everything that we're going to provide them, right? But if we can have a larger subset of really hardcore MeWe users that are ambassadors, that understand the app, that understand our communities, handhold people as they navigate through our new products, we believe that that's going to be a really great way for them to pick up Web3 quickly and then really start maximizing what they can do with it. Because in the end, I've been in the Web3 space for over a decade now, and I think a lot of people are missing out. And maybe it's because it's been very difficult. There hasn't been uniformity across Web3 apps in the past. And so it's very daunting when you have to pick from 16 different wallet providers, right? And then save, your keys and not understanding, what the dynamic is with having your own keys, right? But if you have somebody that is willing to kind of teach you and coach you along the way, it makes it so much easier. And so our approach is to listen to our existing community and to really rely on some of the folks that are our best users, folks that also in the future will be able to possibly even moderate some of the content that's on
Mm.
inside MeWe walls. We want to trust them. They've been great allies to us, and we want to make sure that we empower them and that they can empower the greater MeWe community and all the new users that are going to be coming in.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about the idea of Web3 applications being siloed. We just talked about that in Web2, how I have an app. A lot of people have apps for specific use cases. I think that's like 10 times worse in Web3. I have not only an application for a specific purpose, but I have a wallet for a specific purpose. Certain chains are better at doing certain things than others. And it's like you have to learn about bridges. You have to learn about how to make sure you don't get scammed along the way. You know, there's so many
Airdrops.
things. Yeah, airdrops and how to keep track of
What are
everything.
airdrops? What should I be doing with them?
Yeah.
So, look, I think the beauty of what we're building with Soshi as our L1 is that we want to have a lot of the apps that make sense for our users on Soshi, on our L1, and those apps will be able to be a support system for users as they come into the Web3 space, right? It's a lot easier when you can pick from things that actually matter to you, right? And so if you are in a MeWe group that is into, let's say, travel, if Soshi has a D app or multiple D apps around travel, and you can simply use an extension to start interacting with it, not only get rewarded for it, but also get possible discounts on your future trips, it's something that's not there right now, right? And you don't have to leave MeWe to be able to tap into that. And I think that that's really powerful.
And I think where I see this being most impactful is when you talk about that whole new UI feel. I think having a unified feel to an ecosystem is really, really important. I think out of all the ecosystem outside of Avalanche that I can think of that have this uniformity, I think Abstract does a really good job to have a very sleek UI where you can see all the new stuff and see all the different experiences you can have. How are you guys approaching this issue or this challenge? Because I think that's one of the biggest things that holds back a lot of ecosystems is that everything, yes, it could all sort of be connected, but it doesn't feel like it's connected. It feels like everything is super different. How does MeWe tackle this head on? And Soshi, because at the end of the day, that will be the ecosystem. How do you make it all feel united?
Yeah, I mean that it's an uphill battle, right? We recently brought on new members to the product team to lead the efforts on enhancing our UI and UX. And the first thing that we did was basically A/B test a bunch of other apps in Web3, what they're doing really good, where they're lacking, where we feel some of these apps and what we can learn from them to build into Soshi and into MeWe. We've partnered with one of the best Web3 development agencies to build out our core infrastructure. So we know that's going to be sound, and we feel super confident about that. And look, with regards to the uniformity of it, in the end, by simplifying, I always tell my team less is more. So if we can make it intuitive, everything gets solved very quickly. And, I remember very clearly handing over the first iPhone my mom ever had to her. And she said, "What do I do with this?" And I'm like, "Just turn it on." And how easy it is to navigate setting up an iPhone, right? Imagine if you can have somewhat of a similar user experience, but you're in a SocialFi app, right? Where you're in, you see a feed, you see your friends, you see cool groups, you see cool communities, but at the same time, you have somebody that may be willing to handhold you and show you, hey, this is our wallet. It's fully integrated. It's matched with your username. You can start, receiving airdrops here. You can post your NFTs here. You can download them. You can actually collect tips as a content creator that goes straight into your wallet. And it's all there. And you don't have to be moving around everywhere to just find things, right, to do. And so our approach is to learn from others what's worked, what hasn't worked, and just really be a simplified UI and a simplified user experience.
I like that. I have one more question here before I know we have about 10 minutes left, but I mean this conversation has got it juicy. So I do have one more question here before we move on to like the TGE, the main, and how people can get involved. And the question that I have is regarding you talk about MeWe, Soshi. You guys are building the foundation of this super app. But I think when you think about applications that are successful, especially in like SocialFi, just social media, not only is it the people who create the platform, but it's also the person on the other side, the creator, the people who are actually building and making these experiences enjoyable for the people that are there. How are you guys handling the idea of like content creators coming over to MeWe? Maybe people who do content on TikTok, who do content on YouTube, are seeing how hard it is to monetize or get sort of any value for all the stuff that they contribute to those applications. How is that experience different for them on MeWe?
That's a great question. I think that the way that I approached MeWe when I first started was solving for multiple things, right? And I think content leads to engagement, which leads to user growth, right? And if you keep those things, right in front of you, then you really start focusing on all the things that come with that engagement and user growth and the tools that people will need, right, to remain engaged. And so how we're targeting content, right? It's a big topic inside MeWe. We feel like we have certain groups that are incredible, and some of the content that they have is incredible. But we also want to incentivize people that are using other apps to come into MeWe. And a good amount of users that exist inside MeWe walls today have come from all the other social media applications that they now have learned to hate because they were monetizing their data. And so what we want to do is we want to start rolling out some really unique campaigns to position our brand in a different light. So we're going to have some really unique and fun campaigns around maybe some cool interviews, around some events, and I think our timeline is going to be absolutely flooded with really fun content as well. But then we want to also rely on our existing communities, right? We have groups at MeWe, some with a couple hundred people. We have groups at MeWe with hundreds of thousands of people. And so those users that are actively engaging in those communities are the best form of us creating and continuing to create content. And so by rewarding them, by stepping into Web3 and being able to reward them through airdrops, through different campaigns, and to make sure that they know that we appreciate them, we believe that their content is also going to get better over time. And so that's a little snippet of kind of how we're approaching content right now.
Awesome. I like that answer. To now on the flip side, because I think we mentioned the foundation that MeWe and Soshi is building, bringing content creators and empowering creators to make stuff that are going to want to keep people in that app and in that ecosystem. The other part is how much of the foundation are you guys building yourselves at MeWe and Soshi, and how much more is it in terms of the developers that you bring on? That hey, you talk to people who have it an app on so and so chain. Hey, we love what your app does. We love what your D app does. How about you guys bring that over to MeWe? How about you guys bridge a version of that over to Soshi? You guys allow that to be on there. How are you guys handling that in terms of like what is MeWe and Soshi building yourselves, and what are you guys going to try to outsource from maybe other existing D apps?
It's a wonderful question. Look, our internal engineering team has come up with some incredible D apps already. In fact, some of the D apps that we were one of the first social media companies to do, like a dual weight camera, we have that, and we want to offer that and be a D app on Soshi on our L1. We also have a really fun geolocation map application that we've built in-house that we're going to roll out soon, and I think that's going to be a game changer that you could then use within your social groups inside MeWe. I think it's a beautiful thing that we're building there. But of course, we want to encourage a bunch of other apps that are very good at doing what they do, whether it's in gaming, refi, any of the kind of subsectors of Web3. What's coming is a slew of new applications that have either reached out to us because they want to get involved, or that we've reached out to them because we think that they could be great fits for our MeWe community. So look, I believe that once we start getting closer to our TGE, and I know we're about to talk a little bit about that, you guys will start seeing some really incredible names that are going to be participating in our ecosystem. And I think that people are going to start paying attention to what we're doing.
I like that, and I think that's a great transition to this final little conversation here. When is TGE? What is mainnet? What is testnet? How do people get involved? I think when you talk about an L1, especially on Avalanche, you always think about like, okay, what's going to be the ecosystem token? You have a lot of other L1s and have their own ecosystem token that empowers that chain. Is the same thing going to be true for Soshi and MeWe? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, look, with regards to how people can get involved, I'll just knock that one out real quick. I welcome everybody to go to about.mewe.com as well as soshi.network to find out more about what we're building. And that's a great place for you guys to get a hold of us. And with regards to TGE, we are making a monumental push to go to TGE in Q4. At a high level, our entire executive team is reaching out to a slew of different exchanges. Some exchanges have reached out to us. We're having a lot of conversations. What's exciting about bringing Soshi to TGE is the fact that I have a lot of experience on the market making side. And so that has become something that is exciting for me too, because it's a little bit of my passion. But to go kind of a little bit deeper, we have a testnet that's live already. We're holding off to letting people start deploying stuff and testing right now, but testnet is going to come soon, and it's going to be open to anybody that wants to participate. And what we want to do is we want to also incentivize and reward builders, but also node operators and any contributors who support the growth of our overall ecosystem. And so you'll start seeing a lot of the folks that are on testnet. We have an incredible plan for a grants program. We want to make sure that we incentivize people by tapping into a grants program, applying to it in due time, and for us to really reward them and let them go do what they're good at, right? Is building applications that can serve our users in a positive way.
I like that. So, hey, you teased testnet, you mentioned Q4 at TGE. Just one final question in terms of the token. Is it going to be the Soshi token? And if so, is that going to be used everywhere in this MeWe super app?
Yeah, it will be the Soshi token, and it'll be the official token that's used within all of our communities.
Nice. I'm excited to see a little bit more about that. Is there a white paper that people can go read, learn more about the tokenomics and things like that, or is that something you guys are holding on closer and closer to?
You could access our light paper already on soshi.network, which is the landing page I dropped earlier. Feel free to engage us there. Please feel free to download MeWe if you want to and start checking it out. I encourage people to do it now, because if you do it now, you'll see all the crazy improvements that we're doing in a very short order. But I think more importantly, once people are inside MeWe and they give it a shot and they join some of the communities, they'll really, for the first time, understand what social media was really about. Real deep connections. MeWe is the only social media app that actually delivers on that. People in our community are incredible. They want to be friends. They want to help each other out. They want to share their experiences and their groups with everybody else. And that's not the type of connections that you see from the dopamine fix type of social media apps that you have today. So I encourage everybody to come in and be part of our ride into Web3.
Awesome. And all those links, everything he's mentioned so far in terms of the tokenomics, the website, downloading the app, everything will be in the description down below wherever you're watching this. Carlos, thank you so much for the conversation. I think this was a lovely, we say 30 to 40 minutes, but we're reaching down 50 minutes. And I think if you didn't have a hard stop, we maybe would have gone a little longer.
Go forever. I appreciate
thank you so much for your time.
And thank you for all the listeners. And I look forward to seeing you guys on MeWe.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll catch you guys next time on the 100X podcast.